Good morning and welcome to this Family Hubs webinar. It's great to have you here with us. Thank you for joining us. A very quick introduction. My name is Andy Frost. I'm the co-CEO for Gather Movement. And Gather Movement are co-hosting this webinar today with the ChurchWorks Commission. I'll introduce David Barclay in a moment from ChurchWorks. But Gather Movement is a network of over 150 church unity groups in towns and cities that are collaborating to see their places transformed socially, culturally, and spiritually. As a small team, we work across the UK providing coaching and training around 6 foundations, which we believe enable church unity movements to flourish, and in doing so, helping their communities flourish as well. And you might be asking, well, why are we helping to host this call today? Well, firstly, we believe that as a church, we need to get better at working with civic leaders. You may have seen the all-party parliamentary report, Keeping the Faith 2.0, that came out this month, that found that 91% of local authorities said that working with faith groups during the pandemic have been either very positive or mostly positive. As Gather Movement, we have helped church unity groups launch movements for recovery. This has involved supporting church unity groups at a borough level and a combined authority level to connect with their civic leaders to collaborate on missions around recovery from COVID and the cost of living crisis. We've had the great privilege of having Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, who's been a real advocate for Movement for Recovery. He joined us at our summit in June, and he challenged the church to be more ambitious in meeting the needs of the community. Mark Cowling, who you may well have liaised with beforehand on this call, is the national coordinator, if you want to find out more information about that. And post-pandemic, it's easy for us to go back to working by ourselves again. But I believe that Family Hubs gives us a really practical way to work with the civic authorities to help serve our communities. So firstly, we're involved in this call today because we believe that the church should be more connected with the civic where possible. Secondly, we're really passionate about churches working together. No one church can solve the issues of a borough, town, or city. But when we work together, we can make a massive difference in our places. The challenges we face as a nation will impact families disproportionately. And as a church, we are a people of compassion with assets that we can use to serve. Many of us are already doing so much already, but Family Hubs is an opportunity to be a bit more joined up, to compassionately care for our communities together, connecting as the church. So we're hosting this call because we believe that the church needs to work better with the civic, and because we have a moment to come together to make a real difference in people's lives as we connect with the Family Hubs initiative. So by the end of this 60-minute webinar, you will do 3 things. First of all, you will understand more of the Family Hub model, which is a government-funded initiative and being launched in 75 boroughs across England. You'll hear a keynote from Andrea King, the director of the National Centre for Family Hubs. Second of all, you're going to hear some stories about church hubs and see how churches in your area can get involved to support families. And third of all, you're going to hear the next steps, how you can collaborate with other churches in your area and start a conversation about Family Hubs with your local council's Children's Services Director. That is the plan for the next hour. Hope that all makes sense. Let me introduce you now to David Barclay from ChurchWorks. David, over to you.
Thanks, Andy, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is David Barclay, and I'm from the ChurchWorks Commission. The ChurchWorks Commission is a project to help national church leaders work together with government on COVID recovery-related issues. We saw during the pandemic an amazing movement of churches working together at a local level, but also working in partnership with government, whether that was local or regional or national, in serving their community. And some of those barriers that we might have seen previously to that kind of collaboration just fell away in that kind of crisis context. And the ChurchWorks Commission exists to try and carry that on and to extend and expand that partnership working. And so we've been working with senior leaders from all of the different major denominations over the last year now, first of all, to identify what are their biggest common priorities in terms of COVID recovery. And the answer to that question was it's around children and young people, it's around social isolation and loneliness, and it's around mental health and well-being. And so then we've been talking to government about within those different themes, where are the biggest opportunities for partnership working and collaboration. And that has resulted in 3 practical strands of work now for the Commission. One of them is what we're talking about here today, which is family hubs, and how can churches work together with local authorities to be an integral part of those family hub networks. The second one is thinking about mental health and well-being, and particularly about social prescribing and how churches can connect in well with the health system and with social prescribing to make sure that people can access the support that they need for their well-being and their mental health. And the third one now is around the cost of living crisis, and it's something called the Warm Welcome campaign, which is all about helping churches, along with other faith groups and other local community organisations, to open their doors and serve people that might be struggling to heat their homes this winter. So that, as you can see, there's plenty to be keeping us busy in the ChurchWorks Commission, but we're so excited and so grateful to have had the opportunity to work with the Gather network and Gather movement, and to work with the National Centre for Family Hubs. We've seen just an incredible spirit of partnership and collaboration across these different organisations, where ultimately we're all working towards the same ends. How can we get the best quality support to the families in our communities that really need it? And we know that the answer to that has got to involve working together in new ways and finding new opportunities to collaborate. So it's great to be with you. I'll say a little bit more about the work that we've been doing to uncover the best models for church local authority partnerships on family hubs. But for now, I'll just hand back to Andy.
Thanks so much, David. It's fantastic. So we're going to hear next of all then from Andrea King. It's great to have you on the call with us. And you're going to kind of give us a bit of the vision and the idea behind family hubs and what it means practically. So Andrea King, great to have you. Over to you.
Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to see you. Andy and David, can I check if you're planning to share the slides that we sent you last week, or whether you'd like me to do that?
Yeah, we can show them for you, no problem at all.
Thank you so much. So I'm Andrea King, and I'm the Director of the Clinical Division at the Anna Freud Centre. Please do bring up those slides when you have a chance. The Anna Freud Centre is a leading UK charity for children's mental health and wellbeing to improve the mental health of children in the country. And we host the National Centre for Family Hubs as well. So just to give you a bit of a taste of what that means, we offer the most specialist trauma services for children and young people in the country, specialist early years intervention with families who are really struggling with those early years, knowing how important they are, complex adolescent services, and a whole range of training in mental health and emotional wellbeing for the UK workforce, every partner, and also all around the world. So that's what we do. It's our privilege to host the National Centre for Family Hubs. I'll talk to you very briefly about this Family Hubs development in the next 10 minutes, and then we're around to take some questions if that's helpful. Next slide, please. So the vision for Family Hubs is that all babies, and we will go right from conception, so pregnancy, right the way through to the age of 25 for children with special educational needs and disabilities, can experience a joined up local offer that provides the whole family with support. This is a huge policy change in this country. And what it will enable is 50% of the local authorities in the country, plus a few more, to get a dedicated investment to build family hubs that respond to the needs of their community, to co-design these hubs, these local services, in a way that responds to the needs, the most accessible places for children, young people and families to get the help that they need. For us as a centre, the reason we were asked to lead this is because our whole agenda is to close the gap in inequality, to close the gap in exclusion and discrimination, and to close the gap in mental health outcomes for children and young people. So we bring all of that to bear. Family Hub sits within the wider early years and prevention department for us as an organisation. So moving on to the next slide, please. So what is a family hub? What does that mean? It can be physical, it can be virtual as well. So some of what we offer, if you think about teenagers and adolescents, they often prefer a bit more of a digital offer. If you think about parents and carers who've experienced exclusion or marginalisation, they may find a digital offer more accessible in the first instance to build trust. However you want to deliver it, it's a system-wide model saying we need services that go from the point that you're pregnant right the way up through teenage years into early adulthood. how can we link those services together locally? And so that's the aim of the Family Hub programme. And we'll go on to talk about what does that look like in different areas and what does that need to include. But this is what they're there to do. Next slide, please. When we think about the level of help that children, young people and families need, we recognise there's a huge range of need, and actually there's a lot of complex need. Lots and lots of children were badly affected by COVID lockdown. They were stuck in environments that weren't good for them. So lots and lots of children have very complex needs as you look at this graph, needing very specialist intervention. That isn't what family hubs are aiming to do. Family hubs are aiming to offer universal services, so services that everyone benefits from, everybody needs, and the earliest of help. That's important to bear in mind because family hub arrangements won't be asking our workforce to do more than they are able to do. What they will do is link up with specialist services like specialist mental health, specialist social care, specialist criminal justice and drug and alcohol services where families need that help. But their primary focus is on universal and early help that helps most of our families in the country. Next slide, please. So when we look at what is this really intended to do, we've seen a huge national investment in children and young people, and particularly in the early years of life. We know those first 1,001 days when our new human beings arrive on the planet, our babies arrive, are really, really important to the development and the welfare of the rest of a child's life and their onward development. So you'll see a huge amount of investment, particularly in those early years. Parenting is not easy. If you're adopting a child in that age range, it's not easy. So practical support for families. The whole intention of family hubs is to link together what can we offer as statutory services in early help in local authorities, in the health economy, health visiting, midwifery, those kinds of services, parenting support, along with a social care offer and help with our voluntary and community and faith sectors and with our schools. So it's about linking us together. No matter how many services we offer, what the evidence tells us, what families tell us, what young people tell us, is it's not the service that makes the most difference often. It's the building of a relationship of trust. It's knowing that the person you're talking to really welcomes you, that you are safe there, that you can trust them to listen to what it is that you are living, you are experiencing, what it is you need help with. And in the context of austerity and the pressure of cost of living, this is all the more important because the pressures on families are rising. So we look at a whole family approach, but we emphasize what does it mean to build a relationship of trust. And we do that deliberately because both the evidence and lived experience of families tell us that's the most important thing. Next slide, please. This is who we are. This is what we look like. We're a small team, really, and we're serving the whole country at the moment. Dr. Abby Miranda is our Head of Early Years and Prevention, and Claudia Cousins oversees family hubs as a provision and is with us today on the call to be able to take questions from you. So this is who we are. If you want to kind of see who we are, what we do, this is our setup. Next slide, please. And I should say our evidence partner is the Early Intervention Foundation, who do a lot of the analysis of what works, so you can draw on good things from the evidence. So these are all the services that are envisaged to be a part of the Family Hub offer. It's quite big. So you'll see everything from midwifery and antenatal and perinatal care through to health visiting and school nursing and mental health support, all the way through to youth support, reducing parental conflict, and a range of other additional support offers, employment, money, domestic abuse, substance abuse. So this kind of inner circle and outer circle working together, It's quite vast. Now, you'll know from your own experience that in the faith sector, in your church environments, you'll be interfacing with a number of these services already. So this is building on some of what many of you will already be doing, and doing very well actually in many places, but it's about bringing it together more coherently and more consistently in the first couple of years across half of the country. Next slide, please. So everything that we produce at the National Centre has got 3 strands to it. We work with the Early Intervention Foundation to make sure we've got strong evidence base. What works? What do we know that we've tested and we can see the difference it makes? So when we invest this precious resource, we know what we're investing in is going to make a difference to children, young people and families. It's informed by people working on the front line, our practice leaders. We know this helps the most. And everything we produce is co-produced with children, and it's co-produced with parents and carers. So the lived experience of our children and families informs everything that we provide. Everything we produce is available freely. So you can go on our website and access it really easily. All of our webinars, which run monthly, are freely available to you. Please come and join us if you'd like to be a part of this. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as you look at the picture of the country, this is what the country looks like in terms of the areas of investment. So you'll see the kind of national coverage. Those areas with the greatest deprivation, the greatest levels of need have been prioritised first. And everybody receives a very kind of modest amount of income just to get going with designing and constructing family hubs across their partnership. Now, there are a couple of areas that have got additional funding. In total, we'll be looking at 12 areas with this additional funding, but that's not all been made public yet. Those areas are called transformation fund areas, and they'll receive much more investment of £1 million to really innovate and to really lead the way. And so we're working particularly closely with York and Cheshire East and Brighton and Hove and areas receiving that investment. And we will be, as soon as we've got the green light, sharing with you the map that depicts all of that in much more detail, but that hasn't all been made public yet. So we can only talk about some of it. As soon as we can talk about all of it, we'll share that with you. Next slide, please. So how does this work? The first thing that we're doing is championing the adoption of family hubs. So people are really keen to do this all over the country because it responds to community need. We're providing tailored regional support. So what that means is we go out to North East and Midlands and South East and London, etc., and coordinate practice conversations between the leaders who are transforming this work. We welcome leaders in children's services who don't yet have the investment, so they can join the conversation too and start their planning. Those are conversations that some of you will want to get involved in, and the door remains open. We also develop and disseminate new resources every month. And I don't know if any of you joined us at our big national conference last week on access and inclusion, at which we welcomed 800 people got involved in that conference. So things like that, you're very welcome to join us at. Next slide, please. So the outcome changes will just follow this pattern through. And if you click again for me, all of this kind of input is to ensure that local authorities have the skill and support they need to achieve the vision for children and young people. Next slide, please. We've also set up and established, and this hasn't happened before, a pan-governmental discussion forum. So all the government departments coming together to try and talk about actually how do we coordinate our policy, our practice, our action to improve outcomes for children and families around family hubs. So I'm chairing that, and it's a fantastic forum. It's important because you'll know that sometimes government policy is happening in different places. This is the first time government departments, their leaderships, have come together to coordinate around a big national change. Next slide, please. So these are some of the resources that are already out there. You'll see the web link at the top of the screen. Everything from how do you start to design and develop a family hub? What do you need to do for youth? What do you need to do for special educational needs and disabilities? How do we approach that? What about reducing parental conflict, which is on the rise significantly in the UK at the moment? A whole range of resources. What about the Litleys, 0 to 5's Best Start for Life? So you are welcome to access and use these materials in your thinking and in your conversations with local authority and health economy partners. Next slide, please. So what does that mean? Please do keep clicking the button so that we can see all the boxes. One more, thank you. So those resources, the conferences we run are free to everyone to attend. There's no cost there. Come and join us, please. We're providing leadership and facilitation support at local level, both in local authority areas and regionally and sub-regionally, to bring people together. If you want to be a part of those conversations, you are welcome at the table. There's a bottom line though, and it's important. This applies to everyone, and it applies equally to voluntary community and faith sector partners. If you want to come to the table, and we'd be delighted if you did, it is essential that everyone accessing our services and support is kept safe. So please expect us to ask a set of questions around safeguarding, policy and practice. What does that look like for you? It is also essential that everyone in the community is genuinely welcomed. This is not an offer for some and not all. The impact of exclusion, discrimination is very real in our country, and the opportunity to bring everyone together is absolutely essential for this development. So think about, are we in a place where we can do those two things? Really commit to keeping people safe and really commit to a genuine welcome of all. If that isn't for you, that's fine. But if you want to be a part of that, that's essential. We are also acting as conduits. So for example, Redcar in Cleveland gave us a shout on Friday to say, please, can we have some support from any faith sector leaders and community leaders in our areas who want to get involved in our design process for family hubs? Here's Nicola's email address. She's keen to hear from you if you are in the Redcar and Cleveland area or nearby. We also have a meeting next Monday on the 26th with faith sector leaders only across all the world faiths, talking about this, how we get involved and provide structures and support for keeping everyone safe and ensuring everyone is genuinely welcome from our community. Thank you very much. So next slide. Time now for any questions and time for any thoughts. I can see a few of you have messaged me to say, how do I reach you? You'll see the email address here. We'll leave that up for a little bit now so that you can see how to kind of get in touch with us. Thank you for your time, and I hope I've stuck to time, everyone.
Andrea, that was fantastic, so helpful. I love the idea that it's not just about the service, but it's about that relationship and how important that is. So fantastic. If you've got questions then for Claudia or for Andrea, if you want to put them in the chat right now. As they're kind of coming in, those different questions, I'm going to ask David to share again now on just the different models for how we can engage. So David, if you share first of all, then we'll pick up some questions for Andrea and Claudia from the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Just a couple more bits of kind of food for thought as you're reflecting on what Andrea has shared. Kay, would you mind just putting up the slides? Brilliant. I'll go to the next slide. Fabulous. So we've been having some conversations over the last few months with Andrea and her team, but also with other organizations that specialize in working with and through churches on family support, and just teasing out this question of what could partnership look like. It's going to be different in different places. There's not a one-size-fits-all model because the family hub provision is going to look different in different areas. But we've been thinking a bit about what are the strengths of churches. Of course, the first thing to recognize is that this is bread and butter for most churches, supporting families, both within the life of the church, but also out in the community. And we all know the strengths of churches. But when we're thinking particularly about family hubs, some of the things that we thought we particularly wanted people to reflect on are things like strong community links. Churches are well plugged in and often are accessible and have good reputations locally for being inclusive, welcoming spaces and people. We've got volunteer skills in churches in terms of welcoming, in terms of befriending, and that can be crucial in terms of this huge agenda for the Family Hubs programme of reducing stigma. We want to make sure that everyone feels safe and able to access support. And often one of the challenges for family support in the past has been that sense of, putting your hand up and saying to the local authority, I need help with my family, is a really tricky thing to do. And lots of people are very nervous about that, they're worried about it, and that prevents them from accessing that support. So if we as churches can be involved in helping to reduce that stigma, that's a massive advantage, it's a massive benefit that we bring to the table. For particular churches, we've got access to certain communities, certain groups of people in our communities, again, that might traditionally struggle to access public sector services. We saw, for example, during the pandemic, the role that Black majority churches and other ethnic minority led churches played in terms of the vaccination campaign, just as one example, and hosting vaccination centres in churches improved access to the vaccine for lots of people. So we can build on that experience, we can build on that knowledge and that trust. We've got community-focused physical spaces, and of course we've got that strong volunteer base. None of that is taken for granted. Of course, we know churches have struggled during the pandemic. Things are not yet back to normal, but we do have some really key assets that we can bring to the table here. And so if we go to the next slide, what might that look like in terms of partnerships with local hubs? So one thing very simply that we could be doing is thinking about how do we connect people to services and activities. And that could be very simply about signposting. If you as a church know what's happening in terms of your local authority and family hubs, then you could signpost your own people to the support that they might need, and you could signpost others in your community to that support. That's an amazing thing in and of itself, and it's a very simple thing to be able to do. One step beyond that is a more formal referral pathway, and that could be from people in the church community into services provided by the family hub, or it could be the other way around, that where churches are running programs and people turn up at the family hub looking for that kind of support, could they be directly referred into something that your church is already running? So that's a conversation that could be had. Then we could think about buildings and co-location. So could it be that a church could run a particular activity or a service within a local authority building that's being used for family hub provision? That's one idea to explore. Or again, flipping it the other way around, could the local authority provision be run in a church building? One of the potential challenges for family hubs is Andrea showed that a huge range of different services that are being expected to be provided, and it may well not be appropriate for all of those services to take place in exactly the same physical space. So where local authorities are thinking about a kind of hub and spoke model, could churches put their hand up and say, hey, if you want to use our space for provision for teenagers, for example, or for whatever it might be, then that's a great conversation to be had. And then, of course, we can think at that further level about commissioning. Local authorities will have choices to make about how they use this funding that's coming through from government. Do they spend it in-house? Do they commission outside organisations to deliver services? There's no reason why churches shouldn't be part of that thinking, shouldn't be part of that conversation. So it could be that churches could be funded by local authorities to run specific programmes, like mental health peer support, parenting support, youth work, areas where you've got a track record perhaps in already delivering high quality services. Or it could be that churches are funded to use their premises as a spoke. So rural locations, for example, or again, like I mentioned, services for specific groups. Of course, some of the ways that would help with that potentially are churches working together in partnership with each other, might make for a stronger offer in terms of that commissioning of services. And then finally, of course, there's lots of expert organizations that churches can partner with to deliver high quality courses. So or other kinds of programs. So it's not that churches have to make things up on their own in terms of activities or services. There's a huge range of different options out there. And as we come on now to thinking about case studies and examples, you'll see just a couple of ways in which different churches have already started to do this.
It's really helpful, David. Thank you for that. Really, really helpful. Andrew's kind of batting away questions as they're coming on the chat, typing away furiously. Good work, Andrea. I'm going to invite actually Mark Howling next to come interview two people. He's going to interview Jenny Peters and Ruth Bell about the idea of hubs and how they're working already. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. And Jenny Peters, if I can ask you to unmute, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions first. Hubs are something, of course, that churches have been doing as long as churches have been going. But this particular hub call is about the specifics of what we can do to support families. And we want to speak to two centres that are running family hubs and doing it well. And the first one, we've got Jenny Peters from St Mary's in London, which is a hub and spoke model. So Jenny, are you there? And can you tell us a bit about what your hub and spoke model looks like? And then tell us a bit more about the specifics of circle security parenting and the relationships work that you do.
Brilliant, yes. Nice to be with you. So we are based in Westminster, and Westminster actually started doing family hubs, I would say 5, maybe longer years ago. So they've been slightly pioneering it in terms of a way of thinking about supporting families. And I guess shifting from a sort of very early years focus to the much wider 0 to kind of 19 focus. And I'm also a vicar's wife. And we have a big community space. So from the time that we've moved into the building, so our church is in Marylebone in Westminster, we started doing all the normal stuff, toddler groups, etc. And then we came across this program called Circle of Security Parenting, which had the big advantage, which we didn't write, but we found it and then we trained in it. And it had a big advantage. It was evidence-based. So people like the Early Intervention Foundation had kind of looked at the evidence and scored it as promising and all these kind of things. So it had this sort of value and I guess a confidence, if you like. And what we found as we started delivering groups was it was really impacting more vulnerable families. So often with parenting programs, they're brilliant and people who come who are already doing a great job. But what we wanted to do was to really try and support parents who were struggling more for lots of different reasons, their own background, the situations they were currently in, etc. And again, just reiterating what everyone has said, we know that the first 1,001 days are critical. So this sort of really targets that age group. So we just started delivering these groups and I started talking to Westminster because I used to be a child protection social worker. So I contacted them and said, we're doing this, are you interested? And to be honest, it wasn't really until the family hub system came into being that there was almost a way. It wasn't that they weren't interested before, but the family hub system seems to give a way to actually sort of partner with us in a more sort of official capacity, if you like. So in terms of the models that we were looking at before, we receive referrals of families that come in and do groups and come into different things that we do, and we do young kids and we do adolescents and we do other stuff. So local authorities, they will refer into us. We will also refer out to the wider family hubs in Westminster. And we do receive some funding, really as sort of general funding, but we've also in other areas. So since we started in London, we've now got some other hubs, one in Cambridgeshire and one's just about to start in Lewisham. And they've received funding from their local authorities to deliver a specific thing, so particularly around circle of security. So that's probably, I could go on forever, so you probably ought to stop and ask me another question.
Jenny, that's great. Great to hear about your collaboration with Westminster Council and their appreciation of what you're doing and how that fits with family hubs. Can you tell us just a bit more about, because your circle security parenting is something that you can train others in, set up hubs around the country as you are doing. Tell us a bit more about, because you've said that it's evidence-based. Tell us why that's working so well.
I mean, I guess, as Andrea was saying at the beginning, if we're going to put all this money in and we're going to try and support people, everyone wants to support families, we need to prove that the money that we're spending is going to be, is being used well. It's just sort of basic sense in a way. And so I think the evidence base is, and it's quite difficult to get an evidence base. Now, we would no way, I couldn't have written the program because I'm not as clever as the people who did write the program, but also we wouldn't have been able to gather the evidence base because you have to do things like RCTs And it's a lot of money. And if you're a church, you're never going to really be able to do that. So one of the ways that we've really, I guess, benefited from doing Circle of Security is that it sort of comes as this accredited package, if you like. And in fact, I think Anna Freud you're doing a study at the moment, aren't you, on Circle of Security? So it's sort of a recognised thing, but it's a very simple programme. It's 8 weeks. Parents come in. Parents, mums and dads. We probably have about 35% dads, 65% mums. And we just really train facilitators to walk people through the programme. And as with all these things, a lot of it is the relationship. So you sit and you meet your facilitators, they talk about what's going on for them. And it's an attachment-based programme, and it kind of really helps people see the dynamics of the relationship. So why do I struggle when my child is doing that? Or why would they do that, for goodness sake? And it seems to gently enable them to kind of really consider quite complex defence mechanisms actually which are going on for them, but in quite a straightforward way. So it's not therapy, it's not trying to be therapy. Some of our facilitators are clinically trained, but a lot of them aren't. So we really are at the universal and level 1 level in terms of delivery, and it's really effective, and people love, and they come back and they tell their friends. And we've probably worked with, I don't know how we probably delivered to about 700 families over the time. So it's been a really fun project, and we're not claiming to do a whole family hub, because that is a big thing as a church. Well, I mean, there may be churches that could do it, but we definitely couldn't do the whole thing. But we're really happy to contribute this bit, and through our other hubs, we're really happy to do that bit and to do it well. And we know that that's the piece we can sort of do and deliver on.
Yeah, thank you. That's brilliant. I mean, the whole subject of attachment is so profound, isn't it, in terms of well-being, mental health and well-being of children as they grow up into adults. So yeah, I mean, if we want to get in touch with you, we can Google Connected Lives and contact you and find out more about the program. Is that right?
You absolutely can. And if you're in a church and think, oh, maybe I'd like to run this program, and maybe that would be a way of linking into my family hub, then absolutely contact me. You can either go via our website, or I'll type it in the chat when I finish chatting, because I can't do both things at the same time. So I'll write my email. So if you're interested and think I might like to train, then we're always looking for really good partners who also will want to connect into family hubs in their area. So do be in touch and we can start a conversation.
Brilliant, Jenny. Thank you so much. Great. Ruth Bell, can you unmute, Ruth, and can you hear us? Ruth, it was brilliant to speak to you and your vicar, Julie Wing, this week up in Washington in Sunderland. And you shared about how you're working on quite a deprived estate and how you started from scratch to build a hub. So tell us about the hub that you built since COVID.
So we basically were part of a independent food bank, and that food bank closed down during the pandemic. We were just an outlet for them, and we decided that because where we are is such a deprived area, it wasn't really acceptable to close. So we remained open, and it very, very quickly became clear that actually people needed more than just a food parcel. So we offered meals, because through conversation, and we actually got to know them really well during the pandemic. And a lot of our people are there's massive unemployment. They have huge drug and alcohol issues on a scale that I personally hadn't seen before. As in, we had 3 of our people who use us had died through drug overdoses in a matter of 6 months. It's a massive issue. It's basically, we are in the middle of a sinkhole estate. So we found out that actually they didn't have cooking facilities, they couldn't afford gas and electric, and that was obviously before this crisis. So we offered sort of a takeaway service for meals. After the pandemic sort of ended, we broke away from the independent food bank and set up our own organisation, where yes, we do still offer a food parcel if it's needed, but actually we offer much more now. So we've created within the church a sort of a community cafe where people just pay what they feel, or not, as is usually the case, literally because they can't afford it. We offer, we collect waste from supermarkets and things, and we offer that free. So we get sort of bread, veg, fruit, everything really. And we offer that alongside the cafe. We've got a community fridge so that if we get anything fresh, it can go in there and people can just help themselves to essentials really. We also have various workers. So we have a benefits advice worker that now comes every day. We work extremely closely with the social prescribing team from the area. They are there at least twice a week, dealing with people and issues. We have the local social housing officer who pops in at least once a week. We have We Recovery, which is a drug and alcohol support service. They visit regularly and literally just pop in. We've started recently engaging with the health bus. So they will come every 3 months, and they do like a finger prick check. They check for all the hepatitis and drug related liver issues, and they'll do that. And that's worked really well because this is a client group who doesn't actually engage in any healthcare. And for me, that's my background is, yes, I'm a social prescriber now, but I've recently just left nursing. I'm a paediatric nurse. So getting this client group to engage in healthcare is massively important to me.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. And I mean, it's remarkable how many services you've got coming to your hub. And I think you were keen to stress that that is achievable, actually, in terms of building those links with the civic and public services. Do you want to just give us your thoughts on why you think it's achievable for churches to do this?
I think it's just a case of it is achievable. You don't even need to. We didn't really think about it. It evolved with what the community needed and what they were willing to participate in. It's took a long time to build up trust. It's took a long time for them to feel comfortable coming into. This is a group that wouldn't enter the church building. They now come in, and yeah, they don't come on a Sunday and they don't worship, but they do engage with the local vicar on a number of issues. It's a case of getting out there, starting small, and basically just asking people, can you come and offer support in this area? For us, it's quite an area that people are not used to having other agencies involved in them. It's quite it's on a downward spiral, the estate where we are. They're not used to people actually wanting to show them that they care. They're not used to people who will actually follow up with doing what they say they're going to do with the support. It's took a long time. They trust us. They trust the people. They trust the people that we've brought in very much based on the fact that they trust us. Therefore, they will trust the people that we say are okay.
Yeah. And you say it's taken a long time, but actually a lot of this has happened since the pandemic, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's literally coming up 3 years.
Yeah. So, I just think it's a fantastic example of, the crisis in our communities post-pandemic and cost of living crisis, but also just what you have in your hand is not much, but you have trusted relationships. And actually, people have recognised that and really got around your project and plugged into it and been able to add support, whether it's some of the professional services or whether it's, as you said, some of local groups, charity, football teams, giving food or giving money. It's been a remarkable community effort, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Recognise the trust that you've got in the community. So, yeah. Ruth, thank you so much. We have been collecting stories from hubs around the country, and I know on the 8th of November we're going to be doing another webinar around the Gather Movement's learning communities, where we'll be sharing more of these hub stories. So that's another opportunity to find out more. But Ruth and to Jenny, thank you so much for sharing this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, so great. Thank you so much for Jenny and Ruth, not only for being on the call, but for what you're doing week in, week out as well. Thank you for all your service there in your communities. Some of you are asking on the chat about other contacts from other areas. Mark has been in contact with about 200 plus different people from different people in the different 75 areas. If you email him afterwards, he can link you up with other people from a similar kind of area if you want to do that going forwards. A couple of quick questions for Andrea and Claudia that come onto the chat. You've done a very good at answering them live, but a few quick questions would be, first of all, an important question or point from James Lynch about expectation management and language around church-based provision. Any reflections or comments on that at all, Andrea or Claudia?
I think it's an essential conversation, and it starts with what's the interest of all of the parties in getting involved in family hubs. How does that meet and respond to the needs of the community? What therefore is the offer from family hubs, and what's the role and involvement of all parties? And that must be undertaken at a local level. There will be boundaries around that, and those need to be negotiated locally. It's an essential conversation for the co-design with your local authority partner.
Great, thank you. And the question about the idea of a central hub, people often think hub, think of one central building. Can you explain the idea of a hub and how that terminology works?
Yeah, I mean, as we've referenced, and Claudia, you might want to come in and give some examples here. It can be a physical hub, a building or set of buildings associated with places of trust, comfortable places to go, as well as digital offerings. So being online and being available often in the evenings, out of hours, etc., with particular types of support. Claudia, do you want to give some examples of what you've seen around the country?
Yeah, and I also think it links in with a question from Claire, I think, who asked about family hubs. How do you become a family hub when you're already delivering many of these services? Because I think that although what we're kind of basing family hubs on is a partnership between all sorts of different organisations, and so some of the services might be provided online, some of them might be provided in person. But I think what's really key is some of the connection that's happening behind the scenes as well. Yeah. So integration about the planning of services, integration around the commissioning as well. And what's key and what unites everything is having a look at what data is available in your local area, so that you can understand who's being reached and most importantly who's not being reached. And so although so many services might exist already, sort of having people together in a room to put their heads together and think about the accessibility and the inclusion of these services is just really helpful. So I think it's about that integration and that connection from a family's perspective and how they reach services, but also what's happening behind the scenes and commissioning and planning and thinking about what outcomes a local area is trying to achieve.
That's great, it's really helpful. One more quick question, I guess, about the idea of mental health around young people. Just what is there out there and what can people be doing around mental health in young people? Do you want to respond to that as well, Andrea and Claudia?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of new national investment in children's mental health, which has preceded the development of family hubs. And what we're doing is tying these things together. You'll be aware that the mental health demand has increased exponentially after COVID, and the rise in mental health crisis for children and young people is very high indeed. We've run out of provision nationally and are rapidly investing in new crisis support for children. So what that looks like really practically is you'll see a greater investment in preventative preventative support in local communities. So you'll see that happening. The challenge is that the people who are leading the mental health system co-design and redesign, that's described as a local transformation plan in your area, are trying to in parallel manage the crisis demand, the number of children who are incredibly poorly and need to be moved to more specialist services or relocated in inpatient care in other parts of the country. So if you can just be a little bit patient with that and be part of the conversation, that would be really helpful. But you'll see more mental health support reach out and more mental health be available, mental health support to be available 24/7. So every hour of the day and night for children and young people.
Brilliant. That's so helpful, Andrea, Claudia. Thank you so much for being on the call, and just that input's really helpful. David and Mark, any final comments from you both from the questions you've seen in the chat you want to respond to before I wrap up and give the next going forward steps?
Yeah, could I just come back on the question from James about language and expectations, because I think this is a crucial one. I mentioned earlier about some of the historic barriers to partnership working between churches and faith groups and public sector, and one of them is the word proselytism, right? This fear from the public sector that that there may be inappropriate faith sharing that goes on as part of kind of service provision from faith groups. And as Andrea said, it's so important to be upfront and to have that conversation, both with as churches and then with public sector partners, if you're going to build that trust and that ability to partner well. The thing that I think most public sector organizations will be concerned about in terms of proselytism is the idea of conditionality, that in some way people's access to a service or an activity is conditional on their willingness to engage in some kind of spiritual activity or whatever it might be. And that's going to raise some pretty major red flags. So if your church is kind of operating in that way, wants to run activities in that way, that's not to say that that's necessarily a terrible thing to do, but it's going to be really hard to do that in partnership with public sector organization. But I think it's also really important for churches to say that actually that doesn't necessarily mean that all faith sharing has to be totally out of bounds and the church has to pretend that it is a kind of totally neutral, bland kind of service provider, just like any other secular charity. We have to be open and honest about who churches are. We are communities of belief, and we have to have that conversation to say we don't want to make these activities conditional on people engaging with that aspect of who churches are. But we also don't want to shut people off who might actually want to talk about that aspect of what church is or what church provision could look like. And so I think you're going to have to negotiate that at a local level and figure out in the practicalities of how you might operate a service, what will that look like. Ultimately it's got to be led by the people, right? It's got to be led by people that want to access the service. And as Andrea says, we have to make it safe, we have to make it inclusive, but that we also, from a church perspective, have to make it clear who we are and why we're here in the place.
Brilliant. So helpful, David. Thank you for that. So it's been a great morning. Thank you so much for those who've inputted. Here are the next steps going forward. First of all, we're going to send you the slide deck and the video of today by email, so you can look at it again and watch it again, share with other people. We strongly encourage you to talk with other churches in your area and then approach your local council's children's services director about family hubs together as a group of churches rather than just one church at a time. Here's how we can help. First of all, ChurchWorks are great at poking. They have commissioners from main denominations, and if you're struggling to connect locally with a certain church stream, they can try from the top-down approach. They can also, via the National Centre for Family Hubs, give a little kind of prod if locally your children's service director isn't getting back to you as well. Secondly, Gather Movement are making Mark Howling available. He has a vast experience of connecting with civic leaders in Bolton and helping churches work there together. He's very happy to have a call with you to help you think through this process going forwards. We also have a template letter to send to the Children's Services Director, which he can make available to you. His email's in the chat. It's markcowling@gathermovement.org. And finally, we're also running then this online learning community next month, the 8th of November, so next one, looking specifically at family hubs and different models of how we might do it going forwards. Thank you again so much, guys, for being on the call. That email will follow up soon with the slides and the video. And if you do need to chat anymore, then do feel free to contact particularly Mark Howling. He'll be a kind of contact person on this, and he can help you link with others in your area as well. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you so much, Jenny and Ruth. It's been great to have you as part of this call. God bless you guys.